everybody, it's Cheyenne. Okay, so in 1960, Roger Corman made a film that was shot in 2 days as sort of a challenge. And then in the 80s, that film was turned into an off-Broadway musical by the future songwriter and lyricist that would kick off the Disney Renaissance. And then that musical would be adapted into a movie in 1986 that gave me all the nightmares as a child. But it's one of my absolute favorite movies of all time. So yeah, today we're talking about Little Shop of Horrors. Little Shop of Horrors and I have a very complicated relationship because I love this movie now. It is one of my absolute favorite films of all time. But when I was a little kid, Audrey 2 scared the shit out of me. I saw this movie when I was 6 and I would not go out into my backyard for a week. Little Shop of Horrors tells the story of Seymour Krelborn. One day he finds this strange and interesting looking new plant and no one can identify it. And for some reason he can't seem to get it to grow until one day he finds out what Audrey 2 really wants to eat. And it's a musical! Yay! Little Shop is kind of an interesting animal because it's very, very campy. It's very kind of B-movie, self-aware. So I think part of the reason that Little Shop of Horrors is one of my favorite films is that it was written by Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, whom some of you Disney buffs will know because they are the musical and creative driving forces behind The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. Alan Menken has continued to work. Howard Ashman tragically passed away during the production of Beauty and the Beast. It's kind of a Disney Renaissance film in a lot of ways. The songs are phenomenal. It's set in the 60s and they use a very 60s doo-wop sort of musical style to it. In the film, Seymour is played by Rick Moranis, which is pretty perfect casting. Ellen Greene, who originated the role off-Broadway, gets to play the role in the film, which doesn't always happen. But she is so perfect. She's this perfect kind of like sweet, airy, sexy, like broken woman child, and she's got this really, really light voice. And then she opens her mouth to sing and it's like, oh my god, she's phenomenal. She's absolutely perfection. Steve Martin also shows up for a scene. This movie is also the reason that I'm scared of dentists. The star of the show is really Levi Stubbs as Audrey 2. So again, Audrey 2 scared the shit out of me when I was a little kid. And part of the reason that I think that happened is because Audrey 2 is so real and so alive and so lifelike in terms of the movements and stuff. It's technically a Muppet. This film was directed by Frank Oz, so it was made in Jim Henson's studio, but it's the way it moves and the way that it kind of gesticulates is so realistic and so lifelike. And Levi Stubbs gives a really good performance where he's fun and funny, but there's a really intense kind of almost satanic undertone to his performance, which is really good because the whole thing is kind of Faustian. Fun fact, the puppet itself, because it was so large, it was operated by upwards of like 50 people towards the end. Frank Oz wanted very articulated mouth movements for it because it's basically a giant mouth. So in all of the scenes where Audrey 2 is talking, they basically filmed it in slow motion and then sped the film up, which was part of the way they were able to get in all those little sort of mouth articulations really well. Which means any scenes where, for example, Rick Moranis is talking to it, he's moving and talking at half the speed. I had nightmares about Audrey 2 so often, and part of the thing that kind of helped me get over those was getting really into the film and like watching all of the behind the scenes stuff and talking about how it worked and how it was made and things like that. And it's really, for me, Audrey 2 is one of the best examples of just pure movie magic. So I only have one copy of this on DVD and it is actually the director's cut, which has the original ending. So I'm going to talk about that for a minute. Spoilers for a movie that's almost 30 years old. So Little Shop of Horrors is based off of a Roger Corman movie that was made in the 60s. It's kind of most well known beyond this adaptation for being one of Jack Nicholson's first films. He did not play Seymour, by the way. But in that version, Seymour gets eaten by the plant. Seymour's kind of a fuck up, and also the plant can hypnotize him in that one. And he doesn't actually kill anybody, where he keeps bumbling and accidentally killing people. but he still does, you know, sort of get his comeuppance in the end of the film. In the off-Broadway production, in the musical, the play of Little Shop of Horrors, Audrey gets chomped on by Audrey too at the end, and you know, Seymour saves her, but not in time for her to live, and she uses her last breaths to sing him this wonderful song about how she wants him to feed her to the plant, because she'll finally be someplace that's green, and she can kind of continue his success and get him all the things he deserves. So he feeds her to the plant, and then decides he's going to fight the plant, and dies. The plants take over the world. So when the film was getting made, David Geffen, who is the producer, apparently always was like, that's not a good idea, you don't want to do that, that's not the ending that audiences are gonna like. But Frank Oz wanted to respect Howard Ashman's vision. Howard Ashman really wanted the ending to the play, so they filmed it. Test audiences despised it, they loathed it. Now this was in 1986, so happy endings were like, that's what the audience wanted. So they had to really hastily rewrite it, and they had a version where Seymour is a hero and lives and gets his happy ending, and Audrey lives and everybody's happy. Most people, especially most theater people, prefer the original ending. Seymour does kill people essentially, and he benefits from it, so a lot of people feel that that's really important to the play. I agree, but I also feel like for the film, in a way, it's kind of off, because the film is not as campy. The film is not quite as tongue-in-cheek. The film is very sincere. Rick Moranis is playing the role very sweet, very put upon. I also don't necessarily like the schmaltzy ending. I would have liked for there to have been something maybe in the middle. Now, had that ending been the one that got put on it as a little kid, I would not have been able to deal with that. So it's probably for the best. It has a really weird place in my heart. It's like me facing my fears, almost, to have embraced this movie the way that I have. There's just so much about this movie that I love.